This is why we love football. What a roller coaster that was. That game seen more changes than Bruce Jenner's closet. That was undescribably mentally.
We're moving on. We're moving on.
We're moving on.
Don't remember. We're moving on.
It was crazy that Manchester United crash out the Champions League. It's a disaster for Louis van Gaal. 250 million spent on transfers, big exits, big entrances, and they crash out of a group that they really should have qualified from. It's something that has to be addressed. If this was David Moyes, he did qualify for the quarterfinals of the Champions League. You know what I mean? It's funny when you think about it in that context, but there's still not enough cries for him to change the way he's approaching these games, and it has to be addressed now. Manchester United are out of a group that they absolutely should have qualified from.
So I'm reading through like the BBC Sport live reaction feed, which has a lot of their different pundits, and it's like a collection of everybody, including Twitter and Instagram, everything, right? And one person pointed out a parody in that Depay left PSV to try to succeed in the Champions League.
And they just qualified.
And they just qualified over Manchester United. But there's a lot on Van Gaal. And you watched, I want to hear, of course, we're watching next to each other. His stream was ever so slightly ahead of mine. I was really mad about that.
With that.
Via, I think it's Fox Sports Go, right?
But
so, first of all, the last about 15 minutes of that fight between Manchester United was amazing.
Yeah,
and it was action-packed. It was exciting. There hasn't been that tight of a space in which I've seen such wildly good and bad football performed in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
All while Ibrahimovic scored, all while Ronaldo scoring 4 goals. It was an absolutely insane day of Champions League action.
Yeah, and that's what as I mentioned, that's why we love the sport. But we've learned certain things from this, right? So Manchester United fans, be careful what you wish for. You scream attack, you scream attack, you scream attack. You've obviously got one of the most stern defences in the Premier League. But when you're down to the bare bones of a squad depth that's just not up to the right calibre, you might be careful with how much you want to attack, because they did attack with the game. They had that early goal. Martial was slipped through from Juan Mata. To put Manchester United a dream start ahead, but then they were just punished on the counter-attack, punished in the wide areas. They've got Dele Blin filling in there at left back, which I think he does do a good job going forward. But when you come up against someone as youthful as Draxler, who is just so creative, he just carved them apart for their goal to go ahead after Naldo equaled the scoring. They carved them apart. 1-2's in behind. Not strong enough at the back, which is surprising considering how well Manchester United have defended so far in the Premier League. It just shows Wolfsburg are a dominating team going forward. Once they get going, they're very hard to stop. And Manchester United did not have an answer after all the calls for them to attack. They can only do that if they're sufficient enough to withhold a counter-attack. And I think they looked a little bit off balance in the middle of the park. Some of the Louis van Gaal's decisions I'll get to in a minute, just crazy, but they looked off balance in the middle, and they looked susceptible, similar to what they did at points last season, where they looked very susceptible to conceding goals every time Wolfsburg came forward. They looked disorganised. You feel bad for Chris Smalling. He's had a fantastic season so far, and it just looked like he was they weren't all on the same page. De Gea made some great saves to obviously keep them within grasp, and they dominated some of the possession. And then they go forward into the second half, they start to panic, start to throw it towards Fellaini. Of course, that's how they get their goal, when all he can do is head the ball.
But they can't they can't finish.
No.
And they have no go-to finisher. At one point, it was Martial in the very beginning of the Premier League season. I know not the Champions League season.
639 minutes.
It was Memphis Depay. Like, they have no closer on that team. On that squad that can. And on top of that, I was confused with the substitutions.
The substitutions.
It's obvious. I've always said I like Juan Mata. I myself overrate him as a player. I think he's been key to some of the keys to Manchester United's success when I watch them play. And him and Schweinsteiger get subbed out.
But you bring on Powell.
I mentioned that, but yeah, go.
You bring on Powell. Powell has not played for 9 months. He's been out for 9 months with a hamstring injury.
And you can't use the fresh leg excuse. It's not like I wanted fresh legs. That wasn't going to be the fucking answer.
He's played for Crew Alexandra. Exactly. That is answering my point. That's who he played for. You've got Powell coming on. Listen to some of the players that Manchester United have allowed to exit, whether it be transfer or loan. Chicharito, banging in goals for Bayer Leverkusen. Of course, he was not firing on all cylinders for Man United, but still can be pretty useful in the last several minutes of a game. He still knows where the goal is. I think he'd be useful there. Danny Welbeck, of course, Januzaj, of course, Van Persie, all these players that have been shown the door, and then you've brought in £250 million worth of players, but when it comes to a crucial game like this, because you've spent that money not so wisely, you have to resort to players like Varela, who's playing at right back, Borthwick Jackson, who's a 19
That's
or 18
the one that
year old,
subbed in that I was
and then Powell, who's not played for 9 months with a hamstring injury. His first game was last week in an under-21s game. That's what Louis van Gaal is doing. That's what he's paid to do. This is his decision to do that. That is where it has to come onto him. He has to face this head on. Don't give me some bullshit about pigs flying and I was told this and they chant Louis van Gaal's army. They're not chanting Louis van Gaal's army. They're chanting, we're bang average. We are bang average at the moment. And that's not me saying we, as in Manchester United. Of course, I do like Man United as a team. Always have followed them. But they're a bang average team at the moment. David Moyes took so much hate from that team and the way he performed with Manchester United. Louis van Gaal's been given far too much slack. Far too much slack in this situation. And now they crash out. They go into the Europa League and they don't advance forward.
That's. I mean, for Manchester United, what does that mean? I mean,
exactly.
when I look at that and you go like, oh, they're going to go to the Europa League, like that means you really fucked up.
Yeah,
like
you fucked
you
up
had your
to the
opportunity.
point.
And look at the group, man.
That is the
PSV
biggest
is a
point.
team that like Wolfsburg and PSV. If you can't compete with them, if you can't beat them, best them, especially on the road, I get it. Like it's hard to walk into someone else's stadium and beat them there. But you know what teams seem to do that? The ones that make runs at the Champions League final of at least the last 2-3 years, the Real Madrids of the world, the Barcelonas of the world, the Bayern Munichs of the world, the Juventuses of the world, at least last year. Like, Manchester City is showing them up right now. And I don't think it's even a question who the better team in Manchester is right now. It's Manchester City.
And you made that great point there, is that not just is it the games away from home that everyone in the Champions League struggles for. What about that playing PSV at home?
And would they had a draw?
It is a diabolical game.
Yeah.
They should be winning that game. Manchester United of old, honestly, when you watch this team, Jason, they were so frightening going forward. They had the winning mentality, and you bring in this big superstar manager who thinks everything's going to change since David Moyes' catastrophe, it's just not working. He's far too stubborn. And I'm not saying just go and in disregard, but Louis van Gaal is so stubborn in his actions that he is not willing. He's stuck with a 3-5-2 for an enormous period of time when it clearly wasn't working. It's not going to happen now. You're too late. You're at the Champions League. All you can now look to is if you don't make a good run at the Premier League, it's a failure of a season, an absolute failure. And if they don't change anything here, they have to go in January, sign another defender, another centre midfielder, and another striker. How embarrassing is that to say that a team that spent $250 million? That is insane.
Yes, and we've already touched on all those guys. We already touched on the guys that left. But it comes back to the point of, I'm really curious at this point. What does the fan base think? If you're a Manchester United diehard fan, I mean, I checked out Full-Time Devils. I'm curious their reaction to this. I'm really curious, actually. And what they want to do with Van Gaal. Is it a money issue? Is it a Van Gaal issue? Leave all of the thoughts in the comment section below because we have to get to more
Real
Champions League coverage.
Some coverage.
But by the way, if I am correct, that is Wolfsburg's first qualification for the knockout stage.
And credit to them.
So, and a lot about Manchester United in that clip, we're not discrediting Wolfsburg. Every time they had the question, they answered immediately.
Yes.
With those goals. And good for them, they move forward. And with PSV.
Yeah,
in that group. Nothing against PSV either.
Yeah, they were very responsive, like you said. So that's a great way to end it, is on a positive note for Wolfsburg. Did not allow Manchester United coming back into the game. Without Kevin De Bruyne, who left. Of course, their big signing, Andrew Schürrle, guys in there. Their top striker last season, Bas Dost, sitting on the bench. That's a team that's got some, what a name.
Favorite name.
That's a team that's got some depth. Draxler, good signing to bring in. I mean, it's a lot. You can look at some of these average teams. I know we like to hype on the Premier League, but at the moment, we have to see Arsenal tomorrow and Chelsea both on a knife edge, whether or not they go out.
I can't wait.
And you just mentioned there, Manchester City is showing how it is done at this point. So we want to know what you guys think. As Jason said, leave your comments in the section below. Come back to TYT Sports. Check out our next clip with the Real Madrid, and we'll be touching on all of the games overall moving into tomorrow. That game.
Where am I?
I think that game's seen more changes than. What? You just ruined my fucking intro.
Where am I? Where am I?
You're in the wrong set.